Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
It's all about coaching for relevance and bringing that freedom to potential, as our amazing coach Randy tells us. That's right. He says, to all those that cross your path, see with new eyes, soar above the storms, and experience your altitude. Yeah, our pilot, our man who's been in the military, over 30-something years of experience, and he's really good at what he does, just naturally. And of course, with all his training and high-risk, situations, you really strive in, and you really have inspired so much. And you're here to teach people more about leadership, let alone his book, his movie, his everything. Yes, pick up the book. It's out now. How are you?
Hey, good. And actually the movie's out being marketed now too. So yeah, it's pretty
full
cool.
circle here, sweetheart, right?
Yeah. So that's good. Yeah. And with everything that you just said is kind of where I'm going to focus it a little bit today. And that is this aspect of strategic planning and strategic vision and all, but in situations that do not just fit rote academic thing. And I'll bring in one military aspect of it from back in the Cold War days, which is just sort of a decent little picture of this. But then I'll also bring in a few things that are things that people need to think about. It's not just rote academic.
All right. Well, what did you have in mind for us today? Book, movie? What advice are you going to share with us? What stories are you going to bring to the table? Because it's always something new, interesting, enlightening.
Well, and that's what it is. It's really this aspect of when when a leader is developing their team, or when they are taking lead in leading their team in a situation that does not always fit rote academic pictures. How have you really been developed to be able to do that effectively? And I will say this, that so many people today that I've heard are people that just, if it doesn't just fit their rote academic sort of thought, they just blame everything out there and stuff that, that's just doing it all wrong. Well, guess what? In the real world, it's not necessarily wrong. It's just different sometimes. And you got to be aware of that. And you got to be aware of how you're going to adapt your strategy to that. And that's what a lot of people don't think about too much.
Thank you. Well, you're going to make sure you do that, of course, and we're going to talk more about that and anything else relevant in the news. I know you're always on top of everything in your world of aviation that we need to discuss as well.
Yeah. And, it's been good. It's always great in working with pilots and things of that nature. And helping them kind of develop their thinking and their decision making and awareness and all of that kind of stuff, so that you're not just fitting rote academic pictures kind of thing. And that's a key area where I bring my neuroscience, but also my coaching ability and my understanding of all that. Yeah. And so yeah, pretty fun.
Good. Well, we're glad to have you back.
Yeah, well, thank you. Well, I'll tell you what, if you want, I'll start to get going here a little bit, because I know we're running just a couple of minutes late. But I will say this, that it's always a pleasure to be on with you, Jill. I'll just say that. So thank you. But I'll tell you this, that in fact, one of the things that I'll do is I'll share a little story that an expert has shared with me recently, and I think it's dead right. He knew the person's name, but I don't remember the guy's name. I'll have to be honest on that. But what it did is, it's a interesting picture when you're looking at having to lead your team or develop your people so that they can be successful in an unpredictable VUCA environment, variable, uncertain, changing and adaptive kind of thing. And I'll also bring out, after we kind of mention this, I'll also bring out a couple of strategic thinking insights that sometimes people don't think about. But you know what? In a lot of situations in today's world, you do. Mm-hmm. And so I'll just sort of throw that out.
Well, where do we begin? I mean, in this world of what we're dealing with, I'm stuck on all these tariffs and what's happening in our world and our leaders making decisions that are affecting so much. It's like, You got to smile, you got to pause, you got to breathe. We're going to get through everything, right?
Yeah, yep, that's true. Well, I'll tell you what, if you want, I'll go ahead and share this story, and it's from decades ago because
Yeah.
it was back during the Cold War um, environment when the Soviet Union was up and the Cold War was every day, just out there just in case, kind of thing, and all of that kind of stuff. And what's interesting is that the story was shared to me. Like I said, I'd have to go back and remind myself of the the individual's name that this was about, not the person that quoted it. But I know this is a true story and stuff. But he was what he was is back when the Soviet Union was the Soviet Union and not just
Hmm.
Russia. He was a military member with the Soviet Union, and what he did is his role, back in the day where you had threats of nuclear attacks and all of that kind of stuff, back in the Cold War times and stuff. One part of his job at the time was to defend a part of Russia and defend a part of the Soviet Union. And so what his job was is to notice when potentially nuclear missiles are coming across or something like that. And then his reaction was going to be to launch a nuclear counterattack going across to, attack the US or whatever and everything.
Hmm.
And that was kind of his mindset on it. But it was an interesting story because I'll just give the short version of it really quick. I mean, there's not like another lot of factors to it. There isn't, but there's what was interesting is he was sitting at his facility this day, and it appeared that there were um, a lot of the radars and a lot of the systems that they use to kind of pick things up sort of showed some missiles that were coming in apparently towards the Soviet Union. But what was amazing is as he looked at it and as he looked at some of the factors and some of the things that it was telling him, he chose not to launch against it because, as it turned out, it was not missiles, but it was the way that the sun and the clouds and everything else was distorting
Oh.
the components that were looking for that. So when they saw these potential things coming in, it wasn't real. It was just distorted within their defense mechanisms here. And he elected not to do anything. And so they never launched anything. And nothing ever landed to attack them because, like I said, it wasn't actual missiles coming in. It's that their defense mechanisms were distorted
Hmm.
and were showing something that was not truly there. But it's interesting that he made the choice that he told his team that they were not launching anything, which sounds kind of weird. And, he was very quiet about it. He didn't say much about it. But what I was told was that I think it was about 9 or 10 years later when the Soviet Union went the way of the buffalo, kind of just was done away with. What he did was starting to be told, not so much from him, but from people that were with him that were told. He, he didn't respond in a way that was not aligned with what it actually was. He kind of pictured it as that it was a little bit differently, but that message started to come out. And
Hmm.
and what I've been told is that he was actually awarded
Wow.
several different awards from different nations because he refused to launch a nuclear attack with that.
Ooh.
And he and it was an amazing thing. But it is sort of a picture when you think about it, because when so many
Mm.
people in today's world
Gosh.
have this picture, this academic picture in their mind, and they just say, okay, well, this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do this. Da, 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 da. And guess what? When the factors don't really make that happen, they tend to play a blame game, or they tend to try to force and beat things up and things like that. That is not. But here's the key. he was aware of something. There was something that made him sense that this was not a real attack coming,
Uh,
and it turned out to be that that was correct. And so a nuclear war did not happen, kind of thing. And the other part of it too is when you're talking about situations where you have unexpected factors, and in today's world, a lot of the factors that kind of come on scene are not exactly what you would have expected at the at the immediate point of attack. And so the bottom line is when you're talking about leading your team and developing your team, but also letting yourself be developed, you got to be aware of when are these, how am I going to be aware of when this may not be? Or, that kind of thing. And so many people in today's world, when it's talking about strategic planning and trying to think about what they want to do with this given situation and all this, what they do is they just sit here at the very beginning and they kind of go like this and they go, okay, well, that's what it looks like. Okay, this is what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to just go do this kind of thing, and you just go do that. Well, guess what? What happens a lot of times, you'll have unexpected factors come on scene. And somebody who's not a true leader or understands this truth will sit there and just blame and just threaten and you know, uh, call things by name just because they're not responding to what he or she wanted it to be done, kind of thing, and all that kind of stuff. And that is not leading in an unpredictable organizational maneuverability concept. You got to be aware of what those factors look like when they're coming in. And here's what a lot of people don't realize. Instead of trying to get mad at the factor that's coming on scene or threaten it or just call it by names or, just play the blame game, instead of doing that, if you realize and you look at it and you go, oh, you know what? If we tweak it like here, right here, that can fix this whole thing and keep us going. Or if we're looking at that, and like in the case that he saw, there was something about it, and who knows what it was, but there was something about it which made that guy think that it's not a real attack coming in. Um, and he made the right decision based on the situation. But guess what? When you're talking about a changing, challenging environment like that, and you're talking about a situation that you're trying to move forward in, when those unexpected factors come on scene, guess what? Your ability cannot just be, well, here's our strategy, here's our plan, here's what we're going to do. You can't do that a lot of times. What you have to do is you have to be aware of saying, okay, you know what? Let's tweak it this way a little bit. That removes that and it keeps us going. Or tweak it this way so that that can't affect us in any way. And we can still keep going. And all that. And so, when you're talking about this aspect of leading your teams in a challenging environment where it's not just rote academic, which, let's face it, is so much of the world out there, kind of thing. You got to be aware of the truth, the factors, but not only that, the right decisions. And I don't mean just an academic decision. Well, here's this factor here. We'll just do that, kind of thing. Maybe a little bit, but to be aware of how this situation is developing and what is it that's the right answer and the right solution to keep us moving to success on this. And how does that look given this situation? And that's something to think about. And from a strategic thinking aspect and a strategic vision aspect, it's one aspect that people have to think about. And the other part of that too is that I just throw this out, that when you're talking about leading your team or you're trying to grow your team, because guess what? This could have all happened when you were sick and at home, kind of thing. And
yeah.
and how are you developing yourself, but also how are you developing your people so that they're not just shortly focusing on just one academic thing, but they have that ability to have a sense of when the unexpected factor arises, what can we do about it to really achieve success in this and to really get where we're going and make it so that, when this is done, our bosses are going to come applaud us. kind of thing, to put it in that realm. But the bottom line is when you're talking about leading your team and developing your team also in a challenging situation, in a challenging environment,
Yep.
which most of it out there is more challenging than people realize. And it's and what do you need to do differently with your team? It's not just telling them what to do, but what it's doing is helping yourself and they
Yeah.
to grow and develop and become, so that when those things happen, any individual in your team can make radical results. And guess what? Sometimes this person may choose this one little thing here, and this person may choose this thing here. And you know what? That could be two ways to bring success. And because as you know, with everybody on your team, each person has a little bit of a different background. And if any of the people are just going to road academic things, that you don't want. Get them thinking so that they can really respond when the situation is a little unexpected.
Mhm.
And it's just something to think about, because you know what? Some of the things, if the leader in their mind is simply constantly going to rote academic things, which says, well, okay, I think it's this. Okay, that's what it is. We'll just do that. And that's your whole purpose.
Yeah.
You're not getting the job done. And
Mm-mm.
and so being aware of when you look at it from the perspective of neuroscience, and you look at the perspective of how your brain works,
Um,
guess what? Very often your brain can just shut down and go with what you want this answer to be. Okay, that's what it looks like. Well, guess what? It may not be exactly that. And can you really bring success when it isn't just fully that? And so it's just something to think about when you're talking about this. And like say that military story from back in the Cold War days and all that kind of stuff, that's a good example of this, because what made that person realize that this is, don't need to launch on this. If that was two missiles coming across and blew up two towns,
oh
guess
my
what?
gosh.
He'd be in trouble. But there was something about his awareness with this,
Yep.
with whatever, that made him truly aware of the exact truth of the situation. Now, when you're talking about leading your team, particularly in a challenging and unpredictable environment, you know, how are you going to typically get off of just going with rote academic things, but help your team and yourself be aware of the absolute truth in the situation so that you can make the
Make it.
right call? And so it's just something to think about when you're talking about a challenging environment like that. And it's something like, say, if leaders or anybody on your team is simply going to rote academic things and they're just wanting to be patted on the back because they gave the right academic answer that they think of, guess what? You're not really getting it done yet. And so it's just something to think about when you're leading a team, and particularly in a challenging situation, and all that, and to develop your team along the way so that when they go into a challenging situation or a challenging situation arises, they can get it successfully accomplished, even if you're sick and at home.
Yeah.
And so the bottom line is it's just something to think about. And like I say, that one story was just one little picture of it. Are you aware of the exact truth, or are you just trying to tailor it all into some rote academic thing that says you got the right answer? Guess what? If that's all you're doing, you're not getting the job done, because you got to tailor it all to this exact situation, and
Mm.
and make sure your strategy is right, and also maybe adapting based on what you need. So I just throw it out just with one picture of it when you're talking about that sort of a challenging situation.
Wow. Well, we always would love to have Randy in our back pocket, but that's not always the case. But really, yes.
Hey,
Oh,
I may be out flying. Who knows?
no.
Kind of thing.
Wow. Tell me about a time in your life. I'm sure you've been in many situations like that about, do I pull the trigger? Do I do it? Do I not? I mean, all the maneuvers. I'm thinking aviation, but I'm thinking also in business and in life. Has there
And
been
and
times you have to make that split second decision?
and there are times, and I'll tell you, when you go back into my movie documentary or my autobiography, there's a couple of times back in school when most people probably would have just left and just quit. And um, there were several times, and I think I can't remember if I've ever shared one on the show here, but there's um, there was one when I thought I wasn't going to get going up to the ROTC second 2 years where you knew you were going on active duty and everything. And but I'll tell you what, the tech sergeant and the major stepped forward in ways I would have never believed and applauded me. And with the tremendous tough situation, because I had to graduate. I was getting my undergraduate degree in applied math and physics, and I had to graduate in 3.5 years
Mm,
because you had to graduate to be able to
yeah.
fly in the Air Force. You had to graduate by your 25th birthday, and my 25th birthday was 3.5 years away. And so, um, I think I did share this one time before, but there was most people would have just said, "Phew,"
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
But what I did is I kept going right up into the last second. And I don't know, you may have heard me say this before, I don't know, but the last I had the last semester was a summer session. I had 4 credit hours that I still needed to get, and I was averaging 18 to 21 credit hours every semester, kind of thing, for spring and fall and everything. But there was uh, I had 4 credit hours left, and I needed to, and I picked a physics course that I figured I could get a B in at least, and a graduate level imaginary calculus course. And when it came down to the last time, excuse me, when it came down to the last time, um, it was the day before my 25th birthday. And I went over to see if the grades were posted, and the
Oh
guy,
my
and
goodness.
they weren't yet. And and the professor had a reputation across the university for not curving any grades at all. He just had
Wow.
a reputation for that. And when I saw the grades were not posted, my head just went, because you know what? He was not in his office. The office was closed and locked and all of this sort of stuff. And the grades are not posted. And so I'm sitting there going, all my dreams are dead. All my dreams are dead.
Mhm.
Well, guess what? I heard something up the hall, and I glanced up the hall, and who came around the corner but this professor
Wow.
right at that moment, because this was about 5:30, 5:45 in the after in the evening. And he came over. He said, "May I help you?" And I said, and I didn't try to convince him. A lot of people would say, "Can you just give me a C?" And all that. I didn't do any of that. What I did is I shook his hand and I was very respectful. And I said, "Sir, can I just get you to grade my final exam real quick?" I said, "Here's what I got going, and I need to know this tomorrow. I need to be commissioned tomorrow if I can be. And I'm not asking for anything, for you to give me anything that I don't deserve, but can I get you to grade my exam real quick?" And this guy looked at me, and I may have shared this with you, I can't remember, but this guy looked at me eye to eye, very serious. And he nodded his head like this. And then he said, "If you have dreams like that, I will give you a C." I
Wow.
said, "Sir," he said, "I will give you a C." And I shook hands and I called the ROTC
Wow.
detachment. And on my 25th birthday, my mother and my sister pinned second lieutenant bars on my shoulders. But the bottom line is, to a certain extent, a lot of people would try to threaten people and try to force them and control them and point fingers at them and all this kind of stuff. And I need this, kind of thing. I didn't. I just connected with him, and he did something that was not typically what he did with that, and it was kind of amazing. but it's the aspect of that that's just one little picture of where that has sort of happened in my life and everything. And so it's just, but those are aspects when you're talking about your strategic thinking, and it's not just about pointing fingers and dictating to people and controlling people and all of this. It's not about that at all. It's about how you're connecting with people. It's about how you're, who you are, what they're experiencing of you, and how you're making this work,
Yeah.
and how you're adapting to the situations a little bit to make this sort of work and all. And that's unfortunately the way a lot of people don't think about it so much in societies today. They have a tendency to just try to come in and dictate and control and all that, and that doesn't get the job done.
No.
And so it's just something to think about when you're talking about leading your team and developing yourself further. You got to be aware of how you're really going to do that, and how you're going to really get that type of operation and that type of aspect going forward and making the right decisions. Because like I said, the right decision on some of that stuff with me was to just quit, because it ain't going to happen. But I didn't quit. I kept going just in case. And I didn't get dictatorial. I didn't play control freak games. I didn't, dysfunctionally involve other people or connect with them or anything like that. And but what it did for me, success, was pretty amazing. And
Awesome.
so it's just, but when you're talking about that, when you're talking about leading your team, you got to be aware of how you can really develop them in a positive way, so that they can be truly successful in an unexpected, challenging situation. And also be aware of, sometimes where, guess what? The answer may not be exactly what you want, but guess what?
No,
it may be able to still get there. You just don't know. And so it's just a lot of things like that sometimes people don't think about.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much. Always a pleasure having you here. If someone does want to reach out, Randy, please share how we do so.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, if you go to my website, coachingforrelevance.com, and it's up here sort of on the top and everything, but there's down at the bottom of it, you can see my cell phone and my website. You can email me at Randy at coachingforrelevance.com, and the 4 is the number 4, but that's all on the homepage and everything. And as you know, I've told people before that I don't do real hard sales pitches. If somebody calls me and just wants to have a conversation, I welcome that. If they have a need of something, yeah, we'll come up with something. But I enjoy meeting people, and as you probably heard me say, Jill, that even with my autobiography and the movie documentary, I shared this with a group of people at a high school that I was talking with today, and I said that, you know what, my goal is not to get my name out there. My goal is to provide a benefit and a legacy for people, even after I'm dead and gone. If they don't even remember my name, but they realize that there was this person 2 years ago or 20 years ago that brought this thing out, and I applied it, and boy, what a difference it's made. That's what I'm all about. So
Beautifully said.
Just something to think about.
So humble, so modest. Thank you, Randy. Pleasure having you back as always, and looking forward to our next time together. Have a great day, and thank you for always continuing to inspire, and best of luck with the movie. We'll catch up on that again next time. And of course, don't forget his book. Bye.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, I mean, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned. This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.